Hey, this is Kirk.
And this is Byrd. It's the Kirk and Byrd Show. We're going to discuss VHSL weekly rankings. All right, with the PowerPoints and how all that kind of mixes up. We're gonna cover three of the classes today. We'll cover 6, 5, and we'll talk about 1. And we're joined today by Jason Sterling, Dinwiddie Hall of Famer, Jay Golson, who got a little playing time in high school on JV at Potomac. Got my co-host Kirk Hilliard, who cross country, tennis, basketball, All-American, and then of course Matt Hatfield, a Kempsville legend. Welcome to the show, guys.
You just made me an All-American, man. I like that.
Thanks, guys.
Let's start with Class 6. We'll go with Class 6, and we'll kind of quickly touch on the 4 regions, some of the rankings, and who are some of the key teams to look out for.
Matt, what's your take on the change in the brackets that has?
There we go. That's what I was going to say. Yep.
Highland Springs lining up to meet Freedom. What's your take on that? I know there's been a lot of talk about it.
Well, and I think that's the thing, Kirk, is we've got to be careful because that's what we're all making the assumption that it's going to be Highland Springs and Freedom. And anytime we all, and I was guilty of this several years ago, and we thought we were going to get an Indian River Highland Springs matchup in the Class 5 state semis, and then Maury came out of nowhere, which has started their run of excellence, and they knocked off Indian River. We didn't get that state semifinal matchup. So while I do think we'll get that championship dream matchup we were all hoping to get of Highland Springs and Freedom ultimately, there are teams in both Region 6B and Region 6A that will have the motivation, the hunger, and the goods, the skill pieces to go hang with them and play with them. And if you need any evidence, just look at this year where Highland Springs had to battle off and fend off Manchester in a tight game this year, and they're in their region. They could see them in the semifinals, if not the final. Thomas Dale is one of the, what do we have left? I think it's 5 undefeated teams in Class 6, 3 of them which reside in that Region B, where you have Mountain View, Freedom, and Battlefield. As great as Freedom is, and they certainly are great defending state champs, they don't have the number 1 seed at the moment. I think they'll get it. But and Mountain View and Battlefield have good defenses. Battlefield's had, 4 straight shutouts? So there are some teams you have to watch out for. But to answer your question here, Kirk, dance around it, I like the idea. What I wish the VHSL had done was, A, not leave it up to the regions and tell them, this is what I got from a very reliable source, that we'll reimburse you for travel up to the region you're next to. So if it's A, up to the furthest B school, if it's B to the furthest A school, C to the furthest D school, D to the furthest C school, after that, we won't reimburse you that. I don't like that because it almost puts the emphasis for the other divisions that may not have the, quote unquote, components to do this. I would like to see you reseed the Final Four level. That to me is the simplest, easiest fix. Everybody's got to travel at that point. Just reseed it off power ratings. Your top power rating, host your 4th power rating. Your 2nd power rating, host your 3rd power rating. It doesn't matter if you're from A, B, C, or D. That's the most equal. That's the fairest way to do this, and across the board universally. Not just one division does this division does this. That's too confusing for the fans, the players, the coaches, everybody. You're playing for state championships. Make it the same.
Matt, has that been talked about at VHSL? I mean, I know you're an advocate for it. I am too. I think all of us would sign up and vote yes, but where's the temperature at VHSL on that?
I think they want to give the latitude to the individual regions to have some say and power with that. And I understand that and respect that. But the same token, I don't know that they're looking at it detailed enough, because let's be perfectly frank here. A lot of your administrators, your principals, your ADs, whoever's on these, these committees, they have a lot on their plate that they're looking at. And I don't know that they're checking out the football power ratings and how you structure the postseason with so much of their time. And it's a decision where, again, we should have some input from some coaches in some of these. It always baffles me that they have very little to no input when these decisions are made, because I feel like that's the best way to do this. Because let's say you have that cross bracket, and this is a particular case where it's going to possibly work out for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say you did that, and your A team had 4 losses that gets through there. Let's say you have some crazy upset, and your C team's undefeated. Is that the best matchup for a state final? I don't know. I feel like if you go 1, 4, 2, 3, you reseed it. That's how you should do this. That's why we have this discussion going on right now with the baseball playoffs in the major leagues, where they're saying your 100-win teams get knocked out early, like your Braves and your Dodgers and your Orioles. They want to see reseeding like the NFL will do when they get to the second round of the playoffs.
Now, last year, it would have been number 1, Freedom, number 2, Fairfax, number 3, Madison, number 4, Western Branch. So if we did it reseeding last year, it would be the same as we had it already.
Yeah, some years it would work out that way for sure.
Yeah. And I just want to say this. I totally agree with the reseeding, no doubt. But I think it would be funny as all get out if 2 Fairfax teams play for the state championship, because nobody's calling that.
Yeah.
Rusty, there
That's
are
a good topic.
Rusty, there are
they can
29 schools,
Right.
and that touch the beltway there out of those 2 regions. I mean, that is a lot of 6 Class 6 schools that are coming out of those 2 regions. And I think that's sort of what's driving some of maybe the frustration around it, right? It's such a big pot of schools that, are coming there. You got Fairfax versus Fairfax.
Yeah. That's a good point, Rusty. So we've all ordained Freedom Woodbridge to play Highland Springs. So let's talk about those 2 Fairfax County regions. Everybody, we'll start with you, Matt Hatfield. Who are the 2 to 4 teams in the Northern Virginia regions that could break that? That could break Freedom or Highland Springs? What's your take on that, Matt?
Based out of 6C and 6D, you mean?
Yep.
I think you look at, for one, you start with a team that's lost the state championship game the last couple of years. That's Madison, because they have the defense. Dominic Nicely's really come into his own as a playmaker for them, and they've had a couple of tight battles here. Stonebridge, one they won on a special teams play late. They had a comeback against Westfield, and they also had a tight loss against South Lakes in some gritty defensive games. So as the weather gets colder, you got to run the ball, play good defense. We've seen what Justin Counts has done. He's an outstanding coach, and I like them to be right there in the hunt in the final 4-round potential. They can get out of that region, which has got an improving Washington Liberty team with a great defensive line. Westfield with Coach Simmons, who's been there before. He's used to the bright lights in the big games. And South Lakes, who's been really one of the best stories in all of Class 6 this year, and the way their defense has emerged as a really good to elite unit. I look at South County, too, because they're one of the teams that's won a state championship in the last 4 or 5 years. Jerry Pannoni's got a group of versatile pieces on offense, some experienced parts on defense, 3-year starting linebackers, 3-year starting defensive end. They have a quarterback who can run it and throw it in Jordan Dennis. And I think if they got out of that Occoquan Region 6C, where it's, as I've dubbed before, the seatbelt region, some games that you have some head spinning action in the semifinals and finals, you get through Lake Braddock and West Springfield and Fairfax and those teams, you got a shot. So those would be the first 2 I'd highlight out of the gate. And there's going to be some challenges even for both the Springers and the Eagles within their region that they can't get caught looking ahead, because Battlefield's good enough defensively. And you look at what Thomasdale and Manchester have done. They've got state championships in their histories with multiple Division I players on those rosters, that they're going to have a hard time if they play less than their A game. If they both play their A game, they're going to get there, and they should get there. But if you play below your A game in the postseason against quality teams that have double-digit wins and several Division I players, you'll get beat. It happens.
Right. So Jason Sterling, we'll let Jay, I was going to pick either one of you. Let me ask you this, Jay. If one of those regions ends up in the state championship, Freedom is not playing Highland Springs, or Highland Springs is not playing Freedom, who are the 2, 3, or 4 teams that you see that could get to the other side?
One is South Lakes has some good athletes.
Yep.
And Battlefield has 4 players on that team who have never lost to Freedom or a PWC school. The Mikowski brothers, Sage Davis, and Braden Boggs. So they've beaten Freedom already 2 years ago. But to me, it's only Freedom. It's only Battlefield. Maybe Colonial Forge.
Okay. What about the Fairfax County teams though? Besides Madison,
only one team. That's South Lakes.
Okay.
That's it. Madison, no. Lake Braddock, no. South County, no. West Springfield, heck no. Just South Lakes is the only team I see that can give Freedom a good game.
Okay. What do you think, Jason Sterling? What about Madison and South County?
Look, I think I would have to make it a stretch to see anybody beating Freedom at this point. I think we all sort of, again, agree that they're got to be one of the odds-on favorites with Highland Springs. But out of the Northern Virginia area, I mean, the 4 teams that Jay just went through that he checked off no on, except for South County, I think he said maybe a shot. I would say they've got a little more than a shot at this. I mean, Madison's pedigree is super strong. They've been there before. Once you see a team, you sort of understand how to go play them. I mean, we saw this with South County a couple of years ago. They win a game, they lose a game again, in those title type games. Westfield was there, in title games. So the Northern Virginia teams have proven that they can actually win those games. Now, Freedom's a different animal, right? I mean, this is they're what they put on the field the last couple of years is, some of the best I think the state of Virginia's ever seen, frankly. But I think South Lakes and Madison in Region 6D, and I think Braddock and possibly South County in Region 6C. I think one of those 4 teams will come out. I just don't think it's quite the year again for Westfield. I do think they're improving from where they were the last couple of years, because they were a dominant team, and then they sort of took a little bit of a slide there for a couple of years, but they'll be back on top. I don't think it's quite the year for Fairfax or West Springfield. I would look at one of those teams, but I think that Jay's point, I think one of the teams we're forgetting about is in Freedom's region. That's Battlefield, right? I mean, that's somebody that that's a potential test there for Freedom too. But again, I think it's one of those things that were from the Fredericksburg area north. I would say right now it's Freedom's area to lose, so to speak.
Speaking of which, we have not mentioned Mountain View in this conversation.
No, we haven't, and I think maybe that score last week has scared us off a little bit. Against Patriot, only beating them by a point, and I don't know if it was Jay or Rusty on last week's show. They mentioned, Mountain View late in the season and in playoffs maybe hasn't shown us everything that we expect to see from them. They took 2 real difficult shutout losses to Stonebridge in those regional championship games the last 2 years. Now, they weren't healthy. If I remember, there were a number of guys walking around on crutches last year in that 50-0 loss that they took to Stonebridge. But I think for Mountain View, for me, I need to see a little more later on in the playoffs to think that they've actually got the goods right now to be able to take a team like Freedom out.
I gotta wonder about offensively for Mountain View. Do they have enough firepower, some juice there? Because you mentioned it, Jason. Ike Daniels, the Syracuse back, was hurt last year for them. Chris Jones is no longer there. He's at Fairfax. Now, they do have a Hall of Fame coach in Lou Sorrentino. He is in the Hall of Fame, and they have a dude that can disrupt things defensively in Eric Mensah, who's going to Ohio State. So if the defense and special teams keeps them in the game for a half, now you're cooking. But I just wonder if offensively, if Freedom got multiple quick scores, how they would react to that. And they've had some tight battles here with the Colonial Forge. They beat Patriot here. To me, they look more like that second round team. And this is a year where they were thinking early, probably in the year, man, we wish we were in 5D because we got whacked by Stonebridge. Stonebridge had some issues, but I just wonder about, like you said, if Mountain View at the playoff level, if they have enough staying power.
Yeah.
Rusty, this could be a key clip for you, because I think it was 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, you stated that one of the Fairfax County regions could win it.
Yeah. Well, but that was before I thought, before they switched the regions, but I thought, hey, look, you're going to definitely get one team in there, the old format, and anything can happen in one game. But I'd say this. To me, top to bottom, when it comes to Class 6 and maybe the entire state, I think the Patriot and the Concord are the best districts in high school football, top to bottom. When you look at the Concord district, Centerville is only above Oakton. Centerville is 2 and 6, and that was a team we thought would do well, make the playoffs. But when you've got teams, and so I'm not just talking maybe this year or last year, but when you talk about the history and programs, you got Patriot District has Robinson, who has been dominant state champion. You've got T.C. Williams, Woodson, West Potomac, West Springfield. Like that's a tough road to get through in a season. And then again, the Concord District with Madison, South Lakes, Westfield. Yeah, Chantilly's won a state championship. Centerville and Oakton. Oakton was dominant, in the early 2000s. So my point to that is, we look at a team, we look like we're already not thinking about Westfield, but who knows? Like, they crushed Patriot, okay? Yep. And Patriot played Mountain View to a 1-point game. I would not be surprised if a Fairfax team definitely advances. I don't think it'll be 2, but I would not be surprised if a Fairfax team advances.
No, hold on,
To
Rusty.
that
Hold on.
point about the
You're saying a Fairfax team can beat a Thomas Dale or Highland Springs or a
Or a
Yes.
Freedom or a Battlefield is what he said.
Yes.
Are you
Yes.
crazy? Crazy. No,
Let me just say, hold on,
really
and I'll
agree.
let Matt go. Freedom won 1 state championship, bro. 1. That means they only been to 2 finals. They lost. They got crushed by Manchester. I'm not taking it. Freedom. Y'all can say what you want, but the difference between every other year, Freedom was good over the last 7, 8 years, and this year and last year's team was TJ Bush in the defense. This team resets to old Freedom. You're going to have to prove it to me, because they used to crush people like this before. You got to prove it to me without TJ Bush that you're going to win the state championship.
they
Rusty's
scored
point-
against the Math on every single drive. How do you
The
explain
math
that?
is not good. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, to Rusty's point, I think Freedom's going to probably win the state championship. Then we're Highland Springs. I'll say that out of the gate here. But there's always a but here. I go back to 2005. The way Freedom scores, as explosive as they are, one of the teams they remind me of is from the beach area, Lansdowne. Remember that group with Percy Hardman and Damon?
Yep.
What happened? Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, guys, but they ran into a team from the Concord district that was rugged and physical,
Yep.
Oakton, Keith Payne. So if
Yep.
you get into a December playoff game where the conditions aren't great of the field, it is possible. I don't think it's probable, but if they ran into a team that can smash them, that doesn't have to be from the Concord or Fairfax, it could be from anywhere. You can see an offense that has a lot of skill and athleticism and finesse, and it looks unstoppable, get stopped, whether it's Freedom or Maury or whoever that is, Lansdowne from years ago, Oscar Smith, fill in the blank. It's possible. I don't know that it's probable. So there is something to be said about it. I do think that Concord has produced a lot of teams over the years. You go back to
Westfield won 5 state
Westfield,
championships over the
Centerville,
last 20 years.
and you can see a team that has a lot of speed and playmakers get neutralized that time of the year. So there is something to be said for that in different styles of play. But do I think the odds are in the favor of that happening? Probably not. But it is something you have to wonder about, where that physicality from those leagues, I think those teams, they're hardened come playoff times. There's not necessarily, the fear factor might be a little less. Now, what happens in those games, it's like when you watch these college football upsets. What you don't want to have happen is, if your Freedom is, you want to jump on those teams fast. You want to erase doubt quickly. Don't let them hang around in the ball game to where it's third quarter. And we're not used to 14-6. We're not used to 20-12 or 7-6. You don't want to be in that situation, because that happened almost to Oscar Smith one year, remember, against Oakton, and they had to escape that in the state semi. So you want to erase doubt quickly. But if you get in a spot where you're not used to, and let's be honest, these teams that are dominant we're talking about, whether it's Freedom or Highland Springs or Maury or Phoebus or Liberty Christian, all these teams across the state, most of them have not been in tight ball games, which is why you have schools like Highland Springs and Freedom and Maury scheduling teams such as DeMatha and Wise and out-of-state competition to get them ready for the playoff journey, so that they're in those situations where it is close and they're not blowing people out by 40, 50 points.
Yep. So before we move to 5, because we love talking about this, we go on and we got a great conversation coming up at 5. But the best team doesn't always win the state championship. Okay. It's who plays well in the playoffs. We got injuries coming. If South County can start to click, when I saw them play Madison, Jordan Dennis did not get it going. Neither team got it going. And I could see South County. Now, when I see Madison, I see a team that could be clicking on all cylinders, and a big, powerful, athletic team that just will take care of them, such as Freedom and Highland Springs. But that's what we play the games for. I saw a Phoebus team in 2007 that's one of the best high school teams to ever step on the field. Quite frankly, they got handed by Stonebridge right here in Ashburn. Stonebridge beat them. Jerron Gavea, that wing tee was rolling, and it was like they didn't know what to do. And speaking of Stonebridge, let's talk about 5. Now, this is a little different. Maury seems to be the team to beat. And as I was saying in our previous episode, not many people have talked about Green Run. We talked about Stonebridge a lot on this one. And then we've also talked about some of those key teams that Maury could be facing, and like the Warwick Raiders. But Matt, you're down there. You get a lot more press coverage. You got Larry Rabama that reports on Maury. When we look at 5, we know the regions. And let's talk a little bit more about that central region with Matoka, LC Byrd. But I don't see anybody beating Maury. Matt?
I don't either, but let me just start with this. Maury is the hands down favorite to win the state championship in Class 5. I think most of us concur. And there's a team in their region that has not allowed a touchdown in 9 games. In Warwick. Think about that. Warwick has not allowed a touchdown, and everybody's pretty much penciling Maury into the state championship game. And oh, by the way, then there's a team with Kings Fork who had a kid run 44 times for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns against Oscar Smith, which doesn't happen hardly ever.
3 undefeated teams in that region.
So that region is good. Region 5C, we can have 100 people give you their picks, and you could probably get 8 different picks in 5C. I mean, I'm serious. You should probably get 8 or 9 different picks because I liked Patrick Henry Roanoke a lot. I think we spoke back in late August, guys, where Bodie Cahoon, the linebacker going to Notre Dame, is a big factor. Their starting quarterback and their starting running back got hurt early in the season in that Salem game that they lost. So I don't want to say it eliminates them from the conversation. They have the inside track to the 1 seed, but they're not going to be at full strength. So they have to reinvent themselves a bit. Matoka, I think, has captured some of what I liked a lot there. They had that loss to War Hill where I was scratching my head, but War Hill's proven to be good. They haven't taken a loss yet this year. They've got a defensive lineman. Williams is a factor off the edge. 2 really good receivers that can catch the football. Keep an eye on them. Look, LC Byrd has been known to play smash mouth, punishy football. If they're a lower seed, and I think right now in the latest power ratings are like the 7th seed, that's a hard 2-7 draw for anybody who gets the 2 seed, whether it's Matoka or Hermitage. And Hermitage, they lost that game early to Oscar Smith, but since then they've won like 5 of their last 6 and are playing a lot better football. Had a close loss to Glen Allen, who's no pushover in Class 6. Godwin and Freeman are rival type teams that can be tricky for a first round, but not going far beyond that. And then Louisa not seen 2 of its most dynamic playmakers transfer out in Savion Heiter and Dizier Carter to Woodbury Forest, I'd be talking about them as the favorites. So you can go a lot of different directions there. I think those teams any of them can be dangerous, but when push comes to shove, I don't know that I'd pick any of them to beat what I would suspect to be Stonebridge, or possibly, if you call them a dark horse or surprise team out of 5D, say a Briar Woods, who could be coming of age if those juniors in Carmichael at quarterback and Capuchin at receiver lead them there and pass the Bulldogs. So I don't know I'd pick them to win it, but there are some teams that will make for an interesting 5C bracket that it is up for grabs.
Yeah, that makes me think in that Maury region, we talk about Churchland, but also Granby. If you think about making the playoffs and having to face a Granby or a Churchland, in the first round, that's a formidable opponent. And then, Mitchell beat Hampton. Hampton played Phoebus close, and then also another team. Bethel's up and coming. But the thing is, second round in that region, I mean, you could have Maury playing Nansemond River, and you could have Warwick playing Kings Fork. So whoever comes out of there is battle tested, and they're going to be facing. They're going to be facing that region that you just talked about. Let me think. Oh, the Beach District. Yeah. So we've hardly talked about that Beach District region in Green Run. Is there anybody that could touch Green Run, Matt? I don't think there is.
No, but I will tell you this. I will tell you this. 2 weeks ago, Green Run was sitting there going, oh my gosh, had they gotten Indian River, which was 10th in the power ratings 2 weeks ago, and they've jumped all the way up to number 3, that would have been a hellacious first round game for them because Indian River's taken Kings Fork to double overtime. They beat Nansemond River in a shootout, and they played Oscar Smith to the final play of the game. So Indian River's not going to have a fear of them. So I think if there's one team that I would say is the toughest matchup for them, it would be Indian River. And by the way, if today's power rating was to hold, the 1-8 game, I believe, would be, if I'm not mistaken, I could be here. Is it Bayside? I think it was the 8th seed. And Bayside played them even for a half. Now, I think if the rematch happened, I think Green Run would probably cruise. But nonetheless, so there's a couple teams that you don't want to say they're not going to see Indian River now as an 8 seed, but I don't think they want to see Bayside as the 1-8 game. See them in the second round be a little bit better there. I think Green Run cruises to this. I think there'll be some competitive, evenly matched games. And that whole Beach District, guys, this year, if you look past Green Run, all of the games have been played. There's been about 25 to 30 deficits overcome, and there's been about 30 games decided by 8 points or less. So those Cox, Tallwood, Salem, Kellam, Kempsville, all those teams are pretty equal. And if they meet each other again, and you're picking these games, Look the other way, because the other team that lost might win those games in the first round rematches. But push comes to shove, Green Run has too much talent unless they were to play a C minus game and someone play a B plus to A game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then-
I like
Yeah.
I like Green Run to come out of 5A. I know Louisa lost a couple of players, but with them moving up, I just don't think they're on a lot of people's radar. And that class 4 has been really strong the last couple of years, and they did well there. I wouldn't be surprised if Louisa upset some folks. Has there ever been any talk, Matt, do you know about, just like we complain a lot of times about the C and D with Fairfax? Has anybody said anything about A and B and 757?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. But listen, the folks down in Tidewater hate this because they were wanting to see maybe a Green Run Maury state championship, especially Green Run's case. And to your point about Louisa, real quick, and I've been there. If you guys have never been to the jungle where Louisa plays a football game, it is an atmosphere that is worth the treat. I recommend to any of you guys and all the fans out there, go to Louisa. They have the lion out there, the jungle. It's fireworks. They make it a big. I think 2 of the best game day, and there's a bunch of them out there. So I don't want to leave anybody out shortchanged. Jason, you know about Dinwiddie, the atmosphere there they have with the horse, and Louisa's a top 5 high school football atmosphere for a game. They really make it a big deal, and kudos to them too. I got to say, they take care of you in the press box. They had food up there for us too for that state against Lafayette. So they get a check mark from me on that. Yep, I like that.
I need to go there.
No doubt.
All right.
Hey, I'll tell you guys this. You know, we're 2 weeks out as you're recording this from this thing being final. Will still be a heck of a lot of movement in where 1 through 8 sit. You know, some of the ones may be sort of in a good position now, right? If you look at what their separation is, but you can close 3 points down real quickly. You know, one team loses, another team wins. The way VHSL works those bonus points. There's 2 different ways to do it. You know, you playing class down, you get those points back, and then obviously, you know, your opponents, if you beat them, you know, whether they win or lose, if they lose, you get nothing. But if you beat a team, you get 2 additional bonus points through the whole season. And if you lost to them, you get one bonus point if they go in and win their next game. So there's a lot of bonus points out there still to be grabbed and sort of shuffled around. So I wouldn't be surprised if you know, somebody that may be sitting at a 6 or 7, you know, climbs to a 2 or a 3, potentially even over a 2-week span. And that can easily happen. Some of these gaps, I looked at them today when VHSL released their rankings this morning. You know, they're pretty narrow, right? So I think, you know, pitting some of these matchups right now, because for me, with high school football, matchups are everything, right? And that is so critical in the early rounds. You know, even if you think a team's got superior talent, they may not be able to cover certain matchups in that game, and it could flip a game on its head where you think it's an upset, but when you peel it back, it was, you know, the matchup wasn't right for one team. So just be on the lookout for that type of stuff as these games flip around.
That's why, yeah, you're right, Jason. That's why we had last year Colonial Forge knocked off Battlefield. It was a great matchup for them in the first round. And to the other point about the power ratings, just I brought up Indian River. Look, they jumped from 10 to 3 within 2 weeks just based off their win over Nance Minerva. So you're going to see a couple of big flips and shakeups where, and I'd caution people that think you don't make your plans early when you think a week before the postseason, like, oh, we're going to such and such place. No, don't do that, because one result and even a game that doesn't involve your team can change who your team plays the next week.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and move over to Class 1. But one thing I'd say also about this is that you got to take into consideration is coaching. We can talk all this. You got a bunch of 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds that still need to have to be playing and get that system and understanding this time of year. So you got the athletes, but a lot of people aren't considering. Some coaches can coach regular season, and then they get in that big game and things kind of tighten up on. And so that's something I like us to, you know, to be aware of. Everybody can't get it done just because they get it done in a regular season.
Let me tease you guys with this as you're talking about coaching there, Rusty. Potential at Charlottesville in December for the Class 5 and 6. In the early game, you could have Lauren Johnson versus Daryl Overton. And in the late game, you could have DeRee McCain versus Mickey Thompson. That
I was going to say, that before we go to
would be royalty on the sidelines, roaming those sidelines. I mean, that even if you're not a fan of one of those teams, you got to find a way to make it your way to Scott Stadium.
We didn't talk about 5 Stonebridge's region. We didn't say anything about the interplay. So that is Stonebridge's the win. And this team, if they can get things going, if they can start to click, if they cut down, if that wing team is going. There's so many weapons on that Stonebridge team. And if you're ever going to look at someone, I mean, everyone would love to see Freedom play Maury. But if there's a team that could beat Maury, and with a classic coach who's towards the twilight of his career, the end of his career, you think about the weapons that they have. If they get it going, I mean, I like Marquez. The thing is that I think they have a premier running back, but if they get things clicking, and they've got Briar Woods, and that's it. Honestly, Massaponax and Riverbend, I do not see them. Riverbend's been a factor in the past, and it's Massaponax years back. But that's one that if you're going to say, between Freedom, and we'll go to one, but between Freedom and Maury, I would say that Stonebridge beating in that later game down in Charlottesville, that would be a good one. So
yeah, they're two games. Look, just the history of those two games that they played in championship games. I mean, Maury got him in the first one. Maury got up early in that game. Stonebridge came back, had a chance to get the ball back. They roughed the punter, and then of course the miracle to Zeke Wimbush just a couple of years ago. So yeah. They split that series. They're 1-1. It would certainly be a great matchup, and I think both coaches have a lot of respect for each other and the players and their staffs and everything. So,
yep. So before we go to one, we just want to tell everybody that we're going to do another episode on 2, 3, and 4. There's some great stories in there. But Matt, we were just talking off camera about Essex and Sussex Central, and I'm thinking about some great football players. Reggie Gibbons that went to Penn State out of Sussex Central, and the is there anybody in there that can touch those two top teams in Class 1?
Well, I think Essex and Sussex are the favorites out of 1A and 1B, respectively. Essex beat Sussex early in the season before Sussex sort of found its offensive groove. And I think right now Sussex is hoping to get that rematch in the state semifinals. They had a game recently where their freshman running back, Malcolm Bivens, really tore it up. And I think through his first 5-6 games, he's up to 800 yards rushing and 4 or 5 touchdowns. So he's a player that's going to come on out of nowhere, burst onto the scene for Sussex. So I'll be curious to see if they can control the ball and clock more if those two are to meet in the semis. But in terms of their regions, Northumberland's got some skill playmakers. I wonder about their defense being able to hold up against them. West Point's got a veteran senior group, 1920 seniors, starters back, a lot of guys. But the depth I'd wonder about in Essex's defense has been really strong this year. They didn't return much at all offensively. We talked about in the preseason putting their starting center at quarterback, which was unheard of, but they just run what they run and do what they do well. It's almost like a Eastern version of Riverheads, the way they're like a well-oiled machine, and Todd Jones coaching them. I don't see Alta Vista has an interesting offense, and they've been a quiet 6-2 story. But again, I wonder about if they have enough defensive personnel. They could give Sussex some trouble if Sussex turned the ball over on them in the first half and say a regional matchup in 1B. But I think those two are pretty heavy favorites, although I think your favorite to win the state championship is going to come out of 1C or 1D. Grayson County's had some real tight battles. And Honaker, they run the air raid offense. So if you like wide open college football teams that throw it and chuck it around, Peyton Music for them is putting up some eye-popping numbers at quarterback that would reminisce a lot of people of some of these Class 6 and Class 5 ballers that are putting up mega numbers like we've seen with Christian Martin at Highland Springs and Torrey Newkirk at Maury. And
Matt, how rare is that for a 118 to throw?
It's extremely rare. It's extremely rare, Jason, because you don't have generally the numbers and the depth to do it. So they had a game that was basketball on grass, 70-something to 50-something against Narrows, who has a great two-sport athlete in Collier Pruitt. They picked him off a few different times in that game, and then they turned around and played Patrick Henry Glade Spring with a lineman that Virginia Tech and others are recruiting in Tyler Barrett. And they win that game by playing smash mouth run in the rain, 26-18, old school football. So I think just that flexibility that Honaker has to run it or throw it, even when their defense isn't playing great, they're making plays, similar to what maybe the Cleveland Browns was able to do against the Colts in a high-scoring game, but their defense has been rock solid all year. So they find different ways to win. And I think the two ways to win a state championship at the smaller level in Class 1 or Class 2 is you have that dominant player, which we've seen King William have with Damon Claiborne, who went to Wake Forest. Riverheads has in Caden Cook Cash. Graham had last year in Tydress Clements, and Radford might have this year in Class 2. And quarterback Landon Clark, who's getting recruited by D1 schools like Maine and Old Dominion. Or you win different ways, be it run it, stop the run, throw it. You got to have that flexibility or that marquee difference-making player who can go get you one at any time. And I think Honaker has enough guys. They don't have that one guy that they'd be the team I'd pick in Class 1 right now.
We haven't mentioned Brunswick.
Yeah.
Brunswick is a very good team.
Well, you know what?
I don't know if
Talking
they're
about district
scheduled.
earlier. Yeah, that Tri-Rivers district was knocked for years and years and years as being super hot and soft. I don't think it's as soft as it used to be. So I feel like, and their one loss, if I'm not mistaken, was to Central Lunenburg, who moved up to Class 2 this year. So they're a sneaky team in that 1B field. I don't know if they have enough in terms of the defense to slow down Sussex if they get the running game going and the offensive linemen are healthy, because they had trouble stopping the run game for Lunenburg, who, if I'm not mistaken, beat them on like a 2-point conversion play late in that game in the regular season. So they're a team. There's a couple more sneaky teams, I think, in 1B than 1A. But I think you're looking at probably a Honaker, Grayson County, or even a Honaker Narrows matchup in the state semis other side of the bracket. And I feel like the top 4 are pretty solidified in Class 1, much more than Class 2, which has about 8 to 10 schools that could certainly claim the state title.
Matt, do you think Rye Cove or Twin Springs could give Honaker a run out of the Cumberland district, or no?
Rye Cove is one of the best stories in the state, Jason.
Right, because they used to. I mean, they went a couple seasons without winning a game, right?
100% correct. They were really, really bad. Coach Collier has turned them around quickly. They had a 40-32 game with Honaker. I would just wonder if they have enough defensive personnel to stop Honaker. You have to really be able to get some pressure on the quarterback. Music's had 6 touchdown passes in that game. They've got to make him scramble around and get him hit. And it was a 14-12 game at the half, but I feel like they can run the ball and move it on Honaker's defense. Honaker's defense is not what I'd call a shutdown unit, because they get points of both Narrows and Rye Cove. So you've got to do one of two things. You got to either turn them over or you've got to control the clock. So that would be the formula. It could happen, but I would lean with probably not. I think Patrick Henry Glade Spring might have the better line play than Rye Cove. So if they got a rematch with them, they could be better equipped in, say, a November rematch in the region semis or region championship.
You like the winner of the side of Honaker Grayson County?
I do like the winner of the 1C, 1D semi to beat the winner of 1A, 1B. I do.
Hey, Matt, how many, just out of curiosity, how many kids do a team like Rye Cove dress out for a Friday night game?
You're looking at, as far as dressing out, it can be anywhere from like 32 to 40.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range. It's not a huge number. I can tell you, just a quick little sidebar. I was speaking with the Lunenburg coach, and they had a game that was not a running clock margin against Cumberland just this past week. And Cumberland at halftime was down to 14 healthy bodies. So they ran the clock in the second half. So if you get down to like less than 22, which you got to have 11 offense, 11 defense, and sometimes it's a lot of the same guys, you're looking at it's hard. And that's why there's been a lot more talk that's been picking up here in recent years about 8-man football coming.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. And I'm not a big proponent or fan of it, but reality is if the numbers keep decreasing in the next 5 to 15 years, it's going to be put on the table again.
There's a handful of schools that are doing it, right? That had 11-man football up at a few years ago and or have gone this route, at least on a temporary basis.
So just so our fans understand, Class 1, you're talking about the entire school having less than 475 students.
Wow.
So that is a middle school class.
That's like one in five. That's like 1 in 5 boys being on the football team.
But that's not a middle school. That's a middle school 6th grade made up here. And when you've got schools graduating 1,000 kids, in 1 year. I do want to ask this last question related to the size of these schools. I know I was spending this weekend when we were going to some of these games with my cousin Braden Byrd. Matt, you might be familiar with him. He played at Surrey when he started out, but then his last few years he played at Woodside and was played at the Naval Academy. He just left the Naval Academy. He's a transfer portal, so he's trying to decide where he's going now. But Braden and I were talking his freshman year at Surrey County. He played everything. He played quarterback, tight end. As a 9th grader, he said they only had 19 players on their team at Surrey County, and that was just 6 years ago. Just 6 years ago.
Well, I'll go on better. The year going back to 2010, when Bayside beat Oscar Smith in a region championship. Oscar Smith, I think, had 72 guys, and Bayside had 36 or 38. And a year Lake Taylor beat Stonebridge. Hank Sawyer had AAA state title. He had less than 40 guys on a roster. Less than 40. It was half of Stonebridge. So when you get down to smaller schools, it can be the numbers game is real. It is totally real. That's why you marvel at how Riverheads has done what it's done. They've moved up from class 1 to class 2, and some of these schools that continue to do it year after year after year. It is about culture, and going back to something you said earlier, Rusty, a lot of it is about coaching and having that pedigree.
Surrey County has just over 6,500 people in the whole county.
The whole county, right? Last thing I want to ask is, up here, and especially these class 4, 5, 6 that are in bigger towns, cities, counties, you see the transition year to year. You got kids going from this school to that school or whatever. They really can't do that out there, right? Because if you live in Grayson County and Bath County, like, you're not going to you can't commute to other schools and just switch schools. Is there a lot of that in class 1 and 2? Have you seen it?
A little bit. It's not nearly to the amount because you have obviously fewer bodies. But when it does happen, trust me, the message boards and the forums light up, especially as I've seen it on ours on VirginiaPreps.com. People talk about a kid leaving from Bluefield to Graham or something like that when a transfer happens, because those fans, they are so deal. Yes, they're passionate. They're diehards. They live and breathe the football. It's almost like, I almost compare it a little bit to like SEC, Alabama, Auburn. It is life and death to them with their football team. And you love that, because I think that community, that tight knit community, it bleeds over to the football field, and you get just the purest form of it when you get to those Friday night games and then the playoffs. It's everything for them. So you see a little bit of it, but it's not nearly as significant. And there's a little. I think, let's be honest, the elephant in the room. Players end up transferring to a lot of your teams that win. It's just the reality. Whether we're talking West, that is where we are with it. And you're not going to deny a family, if they do it legally, from moving to a certain school and having their kid play for a certain team. Yeah.
Now, I think it's a greater impact, though, if they do it. Honecker, if they pick up 2 good players, one from each county, neighboring county, that makes them much better. But it really can hurt the other teams, too, a lot.
I'd equate it to like basketball. Football, you have a powerhouse program lose a player or two that's a significance. It might not derail them. In basketball, you lose one of your top 2 scorers, you can go from being an 18-4, 16-16 that goes to the playoffs to now you're under 500. So yeah, if you lose 1 or 2 key ingredients, it can really sap your season, and not just your season. It can set you back 2 seasons.
Yep. Well, look, I just want to let class 1 know we gave y'all plenty of love, just like we gave the other regions. This has been a lot of fun. We've got some experts up here and just some great fans of high school sports. So, Kirk, if you have anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap this up.
Before we go, I'll say this. In 1 week, the substance of this conversation is probably going to be a lot different, as Jason Sterling already said, in 1 week. So.
Yep. All right. So, look, thank you, Jason, Jay, Matt, and Kirk. This has been the Kirk and Byrd Show, talking VHSL Class 1, 5, and 6. For the Kirk and Byrd Show, we are out.